I told you I'd show you at least one more method. There are a bunch of methods out there. You can YouTube them, Google them around. Um, is the trial and error method. And so, as you would expect, one disadvantage of trial and error, it's hard to teach. You're just kind of playing with the numbers until they work out. It's not as systematic as the AC method. So, but it is sort of the way that most students and people that are factoring these when they're in upper math class and they got to factor, sort of what they end up doing when the numbers are relatively small. And so let's look at this one right here. So if we're going to just do a trial and error method, we know the only way to factor 3x squared is 3x and x. And that's where trial and error method is pretty nice when the numbers are prime or pretty small and don't have a whole lot of factors. And then factors of 2, there's only one way to do 2. It's 2 and 1. However, notice we got a negative sign here, and we have a choice. It can either be 2 and 1 or 1 and 2. Let's just try 2 and 1. And so what we're looking for here is the outer and the inner to give me that middle term. So can I, and I know that 1 has to be positive and 1 has to be negative. So can I combine 3x and 2x in a way to get that middle term? And again, it may be tempting to say, well, yeah, if they're both positive. Yeah, but they can't both be positive. 1 has to be positive and 1 has to be negative because we know that positives and negatives are negative. This has to be negative too. So this way is not going to work. So you can either erase it. I'm not doing mine in pencil. I'm going to have to redo it. And so it should work out unless it's prime. And that'd be mean for you to give you a prime on the very first one. Let's try this one. When I change the 2 and 1 to 1 and 2. So 3 times 2 gives me 6x. 1 times x is a 1x. So how can I get this to come out to be 5? 6x minus 1x. So if this is negative and this is positive, how can that be negative when that's negative and that's positive? You see why this is kind of hard to teach? It just takes a little finessing to do. But I'll be honest, that once you do that AC method a few times, and then you start coming across these in the wild and maybe other classes, a lot of students end up going toward this trial and error method, which is fine. I'll be honest, it's what I do when these numbers are relatively small. Because you end up, I mean, to be honest, I could see that this was not going to work out, this one. I wanted to show you one that wouldn't work out, though, when I'm doing these. So then you would want to rewrite that without all that mess around the problem. Nice and clear. Now, again, you could go ahead and fill the whole thing out to make sure, but I know I'm looking at the outer and the inner. And notice this, we could have done this the AC method. I could have said 3 times 2. In fact, I may have already done that on an earlier problem. Let me check. All right, I did. I just checked my last work and notice exactly the same thing we did in an earlier example. We used the AC method to come up with exactly the same answer. All right, let's look at this one. Factor 4x squared minus 13x minus 12. So this one a little harder with trial and error. We can still try it though. So 4x squared, I've got a couple different ways I can factor that, right? I can either say 4x and x or 2x and 2x. Let's just try 2x and 2x and see if that works. So 2x and 2x. Now I'm looking for factors of 12 that'll work for this. So what are we going to have here? We can do 6 and 2. And again, we're doing outer plus inner. So outer plus inner. So again, 12, I can factor a bunch of different ways. I can do 4 and 3, 2 and 6, or 12 and 1. Now, I can quickly see that 12 and 1, the numbers are just going to be too big for me for it to work. I put a 12 and a 1 here. That's not going to work. So I know it's not 12 and 1. 2 and 6 might work. Let's try this out. 2 and 6. So I can already tell this is not going to work. And there's a little hidden feature you can kind of use to help yourself on this. Remember, my number one rule of factoring is to look for a common factor. I don't have any common factors here. So if I don't have any common factors here, I'm definitely not going to have any common factors in each of the binomials. So I know this is not going to work because I've got a common factor here and here. So I know this is not going to work. I can try it out plus outer plus the inner and know that I cannot combine 12x and 4x to get a 13, negative 13. So I know that's not going to work. For the same reason, I know that's not going to work. I know that 4 Gonna get a little sloppy here. And 3 aren't going to work because I've got a common factor of 4. So I know 2x and 2x is not the right move to make. Move on to my next choice. I only had 2 choices here. 2x and 2x, or 4x and a 1x. Now again, I know since that's a minus that I'm going to have 1 positive and 1 negative. Again, let me redo my factors there. It's 4 and 3, 2 and 6, 12 and 1. Okay, so let's try 4 and 3. So I know 4 is not going to go here because I have a common factor. So that, again, knowing that sort of expedites this trial and error method. So that could be a 3 and a 4. Okay, that might work, right? Because I've got 4 times 4 is 16. 3 times x is 3. So how can I combine 16 and 3 to get a negative 13? If that 16 is negative and the 3 is positive. So make the 16 negative, that's got to be negative, that's got to be positive. This is hard to teach. The trial and error method is very hard to teach. You have to play with it, and you have to be pretty good with your multiplication facts with that. And then you have to kind of keep up with the outer plus the inner. Again, I can do 4x times x would be 4x squared. I'm just checking it here. 4x times a minus 4 is a minus 16x plus 3x minus 12. Again, that's where we got that negative 13. So we're pretty confident that we got it right. This probably would have been easier using the AC method. It's just more systematic. Again, once you got pretty good at this, I could tell that it wasn't going to be 2 and 2 right from the beginning. I wouldn't even tried that one. And then I would have gone to this one, and I probably would have gone that one first. So it would have been a little quicker. Once you get pretty good at these, trial and error, when the numbers are pretty small and you sort of have some, I don't want to say tricks, but some skills up your sleeve, trial and error is where a lot of students end up going when they get pretty good at these.